Now we're going to do a little simple video on the 10 things I wish I knew before starting out on guitar when I went into this new instrument as a completely blank slate. And you may know that guitar is my first instrument. Now I play several different instruments, but going into it I knew nothing. I had fooled around with a couple instruments as a kid in elementary school, but never really went into it with a dedicated mindset of learning, which is what I have now. So we're going to talk about these 10 things. So the first one is a certain persistence combined with obsessive attitude. Even despite recently when I started getting this strange achy finger pain, I've still continued to find workarounds of playing. I just couldn't stop playing even if I wanted to. I couldn't stop this journey. So it's a certain persistence of saying no matter what, I'm going to find some kind of workaround. When I can't work on this, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to keep venturing off into new ventures, and your mind just becomes completely obsessed with this to where this becomes an obsession, it becomes a priority. Everyone has priorities, but when you want to play music like this, you have to make this a certain priority. You have to really stick with this thing. You have to adjust your whole mind to where I'm going to stick with this, and no matter what happens, I'm going to continue on this journey, whichever direction I want to go musically. So that'd be step one. Hear the train. Number two is remembering full songs, complete tunes. So you need songs that you can memorize. You need to go into this journey thinking of songs that you're going to actually be able to memorize and get under your fingers, truly memorizing them from beginning to end. So you need about several of them. So you need to go into it with the approach of, I like this song, I've heard it many times, but also that it's not so difficult. In other words, full of so many chords. Like there's a lot of songs that I'd like to learn to play, memorize. But I'm honest with myself that it's just too many chords at the minute. It's just too, it needs to be structurally something you can wrap your head around. So that's step two, is remembering complete songs and approaching the ones that you feel you can remember. You need to actually go into it with the approach of, I'm going to memorize these complete songs. I'm going to be able to ditch the backing track, ditch all the resources. Now it's good to go back and listen and compare and refresh your memory, but being able to step away from that and just play something complete and have several songs you can do, that is what you're ultimately aiming for. That's what music is. It's performing. So step three is a different direction. It's actually just simply reading tabs. Learning, when I first started out, I would have liked to explicitly have someone point out, what is tabs all about? Because sometimes you'll see chord charts, for example, and they won't tell you what string to strum from, what strings may or may not be muted. I've seen chord charts where they're playing a slightly different chord that's often referred to as a certain way, but technically that's not what it was. And just these little details, so when you know how to read tabs and you're starting to build a little background in music, these tabs will help guide you along your journey. Just knowing when to play the open strings, the perspective of the tablature, how it's a little unorthodox when you're first looking at it. Because once you do learn how to play read tabs, you can begin doing basic finger exercises like the chromatic stuff, the gliding across the fretboard, the big stretches, things like this. So that's number three. Number four is to gain a sense of perspective of where you're at with your journey. take a step back and you can say, well, today, I kind of might have fluffed it today a little bit. You have to use your time to where you're challenging yourself on the next project, the thing in your back of your mind you should be doing. Don't get lazy. So get a sense of perspective about yourself. There's these songs you should be working on. There's these little things you can do throughout the day to push yourself towards them, so you have to do that. You'd be better off just kind of working on that one thing that's new rather than going back and playing the same thing you played 1,000 times and playing it 1,000 for the 1,001 time. You'd be much better off venturing into that new project and at least trying to get your foot in the door with it. Chipping away at these things. Sometimes it's referring to multiple lessons just to garner one style. But gain a sense of perspective about where you are. Because these little tiny improvements of day by day kind of working at that new project, that's where the improvement comes in. Instead of sitting for year after year playing the same thing, that's where stagnation comes in. So gain a sense of perspective, for better or worse, of where you're at and what your goals are. Get a perspective of what your goals are and what direction you're going. So we're almost halfway. I don't want to take too long. Number 5, I don't have much space. Number 5 would be mastering just simple songs. Mastering them, because they're simply songs that are just, you might like to learn as a beginner, but they're just not practical and they're not feasible. Such as one example when I first started out was Beyond the Sea by Bobby Darin. I found a good lesson on it, but the song is just ridiculously over the top in terms of chord changes for a beginner. It's not practical. So mastering the songs that you can get the chords under your fingers, you get the structure in your head, and truly say, I've got this song, I can perform it, I can strum along with it, I can turn the singing or the guitar playing off in my mind, and one or the other starts going automatically. That's what's happened when you've approached the right songs. Number 6 would be to do with a device over here, the metronome. I wish I knew when I first started about the importance of really truly keeping time, because when I first started I used to share to Facebook, and occasionally I would get these Facebook memories and I would click on them and I'd go back and listen to my playing, and like a simple riff or intro or something, I'd say, oh, not only was the tone a little strange coming from the electric guitar, but the timing wasn't quite right. It was off. So now, after listening to records so many times, I've compared my timing, and my internal sense of timing is very good. Do I make mistakes here and there? Of course. But listening to records will improve your time, slowing down records, dissecting every minute detail, playing along with the metronome, tapping your foot, playing along with lessons of other people playing at half speed, 25% speed, then speeding things up, seeing how quickly you can play something perfectly before incrementally speeding it up to the full speed, stuff like that. This all falls under the umbrella of keeping time. That would be number 6. Number 7 would be I wish someone told me at the beginning of learning guitar the fundamentals of just music theory and the fundamentals of the physical aspect of holding the instrument. How to sit with the guitar, how to have the right posture, which is not this. This is just me leaning in, but the right posture, sitting at the edge of your seat, having the guitar at the appropriate angle, holding the pick the right way, not having the edge of your flesh brushing against the strings when strumming. Um, having the guitar, like I said, the appropriate angle, having a guitar that suits your body appropriately, having a guitar with the neck profile that you get on with. And then as far as the music theory, learning about, start getting your foot in the door with things like keys and getting your foot in the door with certain time signatures and what's a measure, what's a bar, how many beats, and so forth. Just the most foundational stuff is where you should begin with regards to music theory. And you can even go onto a site I heard about early on when I first started. It was recommended by a community college, I think it was. It was when I stopped by there one day that I used to go to. And it was a music theory site, and you go in and you just start getting in the basics. You can even go past tab. I mentioned tab as one of these points. Go beyond that and learn the fundamentals of actually reading music. Because reading music, you'd be surprised, is going to develop you more than you know. And number 8 would be just fundamental chords. So once you can read tabs, you want to start looking at your fundamental chords. I remember at the beginning, I started out and I was stuck on, all I was really playing was the E minor, and I was thinking I was playing another chord underneath that. But you just need to get your fundamental chords, and I wish someone had told me to forget about all the complex stuff and just focus on your basic E, your A, your D, your B7, your A7, so your dominant seventh, and then just your basic major and minor chords: A minor, E minor, E, A, D, C, D minor, your F bar chord, all the different options for that are at your disposal. Pretty much the alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I would work with those. I wish someone told me to just focus on mastering those in all their different applications. So another thing is, number 9 would be to structure yourself and structure your planning, because when you're self-taught like myself and you're learning as an adult, you're kind of floating around YouTube searching. So anytime you can find a playlist or something organized, go through that. You might find a playlist of somebody and you'll go through the first 3 or 4 lessons, and then you'll find the playlist falls apart, like the quality of their teaching goes down after the first few things. And you might need to hop onto a different playlist from a different teacher and go through that, step by step by step by step. And when you can meet with that second teacher, it's almost like meeting with an old friend. You'll be like, oh, he does lessons on this subject too? I'll sit down with him and you'll go through them. And you can find plenty of structured material, but with all the options out there of where to go, it's endless. You need to structure yourself in some way. You need to have some kind of sense of, what is my foundation? Where am I going and what am I learning next? You have to have that kind of plan. You have to have these little seeds planted in your mind of, this is what I'm going to do next when I have time. This is the challenging thing that I know I want to do, but it's also going to challenge me in some way. And then you have to actually sit down and do it in that structure. And you may have to just squeeze in those little moments where you can test yourself. And for me, that often happens sometimes with just recording. I'll be going along with the lesson and there'll be something that isn't explained. It'll just get glossed over, or it'll just be a little quick demonstration. I'll say, wait a minute, I'm going to slow that down and I'm going to break down what that was, and I'm going to play it just like they did. And then when you do it, you get that little feeling of satisfaction. But that's only because you structured yourself and you sat down when you had the time and you knew kind of the direction of the lesson you wanted to do. And you might go through a few lessons and say, okay, I did. Okay, now I'm going to take a little break, do something else. Sit down with it again later, make a few more advancements. And then day by day, you'll make these little incremental improvements. Even today, when I reviewed that song I hadn't played in a while for the live stream, I had to go back and review the guitar solo to make sure I got the chord changes absolutely perfect when I was strumming. And I hadn't played that in a while, but that was something I had played previously many times. You need those things that are going into uncharted territory. You need to venture into uncharted waters with your progress and your playing as well. So it's that balance of structuring yourself. You have all the things in your repertoire, you're refining them, you're working at them, and you're always moving forward with at least one or two things that are really challenging to you in terms of the technique. Because like I said with some of these early ones, like one of the previous points, mastering simple songs. When you're mastering more difficult songs, you're not going to have the technique ready. You're just simply not going to have the technique available to you or all the abilities. So a beginner may get frustrated and they may quit because they're trying to go for songs that are not accessible. I mean, this stuff is not easy, but there's definitely in the broad range of music. Some things are accessible, some things aren't. From the beginning, I wish somebody had told me that. Because we're all inspired by something. So finally, number 10 is to get the best instrument you can afford. You don't want one like this, like what's behind me. You might want one more like this. No one told me this. However, I did get lucky and I bought the best electric guitar I could afford. I just inherently wanted to start out on the electric. And no one told me this, but this is one of the ones where I got lucky. However, I did wish I knew it in hindsight. That you go in and ideally in person and you get the best guitar you can afford while researching as far as what type you want. Do you want new? I wish someone had told me when I first started there's a whole vintage market out there. Vintage. And if you're very selective and your timing is just right and you get a good deal, you can get a vintage instrument that for the same price that rivals a new instrument, and it rivals it in terms of tone, feel, playability, collectability, value, appreciating value. You could get a Martin from a bygone age versus a Martin now with a kind of a strange neck profile on it and something that's trying to be too modern. You can have wood that's only improved with time, and you can get it set up. It may need a repair, it may need this or maybe that, but you can get some very special instruments in the vintage market. So I wish someone had told me just how deep, somehow put into my brain just how deep this guitar buying stuff is, because it's very deep. That's why they call guitar acquisition syndrome. But the point is when you're first starting out, to get the best thing you can afford within reason. Don't try to get something that's unplayable. Now anything can get worked on. Don't try to get something you don't like the tone of, something that comes with cheap strings, something that you don't like the neck on. Simply get the best instrument that you can afford while doing a lot of research, a lot of monitoring, a lot of decision making, because buying expensive instruments is stressful. it's stressful because it's always, I got this, I could have got that, I got this, I could have got that. I've spoken about my experience buying my first guitar. It's right here. It's not this one, but it's to my left on the floor in the case. And it's the Gibson SG Standard 2017 model. That's a new one. That's an example of a new guitar that wasn't trying to be excessively modern. No crazy bright blueberry finish or something. It looks classic, and it's got a really simple neck that I get on with, and I just got lucky on that one. But nevertheless, I wish someone had told me. Just, it is worth it to get the best instrument you can afford, for the simple fact that if it is a very nice one and you're not sure, am I going to stick with this? Am I going to, even though I knew I would, at least if you get an instrument that's very inspiring, the chances of you sticking with it just go sky high if you're very excited to begin to learn on it. At the beginning, I played on that SG exclusively for a long, long time before even venturing into acoustic instruments. So when you have an instrument that's of quality that you really feel you can invest into time-wise, you're much more likely to stick with the practice of learning. I hope you understand that. So that's why that's very important. So anyway, guys, running out of battery space, less than a minute to go. But this has been the 10 things I wish someone told me. Now, obviously, hindsight's 20/20. There's any number of situations in life where I'm thinking, I wish I should have done that, I shouldn't have done this. If only I would have known that. But we do the best we can to stay informed. Anyways, this is the video I wanted to make for today. Video I was planning for a couple of days. Hope you appreciate it. Leave your thoughts down below on this subject. And thanks again. Goodbye.